completely machinima. And now for something completely machinima. And now for something completely machinima.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of And Now for Something Completely Machinima. I'm Damien Valentine, and I'm joined by Tracy Harwood.
Hello.
And Phil Rice.
Hello.
Ricky is absent at the moment. I'm not sure he was too thrilled to hear that Halo is being remade, so he's left us. But I'm sure once he recovers from the shock of that, he will rejoin the show in the future. This week, we're going to be discussing my film pick of the month, and it's a short video called, it's about creating a fight scene between Anakin Skywalker and Count Dooku, it's based on cut footage from Revenge of the Sith, but animating it in the style of the Clone Wars animated series. And what you've got here is a video that it does show the completed fight. It's about 30 seconds long at the very end of the clip. And it's really well done. But the main reason I chose it was before that, he shows this whole process of why he chose that scene, analyzing the footage, animating the characters, and discussing some of the issues he encountered along the way before he finally was able to complete it. And I thought, this is actually really interesting to see the making of it more than the actual fight scene, because it's 30 seconds long, but it feels like it's 10 seconds long because it's so fast and then it's over. And it's just kind of like a middle of a fight scene. So unless you're really familiar with the film, you don't really know what's going on there. And I guess it's not really the point. So I chose it because I really enjoyed this process that he had of making it. And I thought, I'm going to share this because it'd be interesting to see what you two think of it.
It was fascinating. Go ahead, Tracy.
Well, I've got lots to say. Do you want to go first?
Go first, Phil.
I'll go ahead, Tracy. Yeah. Absolutely. The making of is the reason to watch this. First of all, I found it very clever. So what he did is he found some footage, I guess some behind the scenes footage that showed part of the choreography that was intended to be filmed for this fight in the movie that never made it to the final cut. But it's like a behind the scenes look of the actor and stunt person, doing the moves. And so he used that as the base. It was just a very brilliant hook for someone who, if someone is like really into Star Wars, this is a chance to see something that was never part of the original. It's very smart to use that as an attraction. But the making of stuff was so fascinating. I think not just because some of the problems that he ran into are familiar ones if you've made anything, but then he talks through how he resolved them, and sometimes it was just a matter of I had to just keep doing it again and again when he was trying to get the faces just right. And he would model the face, and then the way the light played off it exposed these flaws. And so he had to go back to it again. And these are familiar things. One thing that was really impressive is, and again, it was all, the footage was sped up, but even so, his understanding of how to use light well, especially for this style, was just so impressive. Like, just clearly some study of some kind has gone on there, even if it was just study, on the internet. but you can see it in the thumbnail as well. That just the use of the red and blue contrasting light to highlight different parts of the faces and stuff. It's just wonderfully done. He didn't really talk a whole lot about his thinking behind the lighting, but that was something that jumped out to me visually of that he really knew how to do that. And I think the other problem-solving approach that he used that was really impressive to me was how, towards the end, he talks about how he handled the giving the blades a swish look as they move through the air. And that wouldn't work in a if he was going for like a photo reel type of thing. But in that style, it is perfectly appropriate. That's I don't know how they do it in the real show, the animated show, but his technique, there's just no denying that the effect is perfect, just wonderful. So, it's a little fast to be called a tutorial. It's not a tutorial, but it's one of those videos that you can kind of watch, and he shows you enough visually and with what he's sharing in his talking that you've got enough to go on that, hey, I want to learn how to do that technique. There's enough there where you can dig deeper if you want to, somewhere else. So I like that kind of video. It's short and sweet and inspirational, to see not just the outcome. I don't think I would have been inspired particularly by the final product. I don't know why. It just wouldn't have really been impactful on me. But seeing what he went through to build it and the obstacles that he overcame, yeah, it's a nice form for a video that I'm tempted to find ways to emulate that form of brief intro. Here's what I'm doing, showing that how to, but in very nutshell form, detailed nutshell. It's a weird mix, right? And then here's the finished product. I think the other person that I've seen do that is Ian Hubert, I think his name is, the guy who's really good with Blender.
Mm.
He did a series of, I think he called them his lazy tutorials.
Yes, yes.
They were very brief, but it's the same concept of, I wanted to do this, and then he narrates his way through it, and you're seeing all this stuff happen. His are kind of jokey because inevitably at some point in this short video, he's going along at a measured pace, and then suddenly he does like 10,000 things in the next 3 seconds. And so then I just built the rest of the city and blah, 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 and here's the finished product. So he's doing it with humor in mind. This was a more serious approach and not intentionally designed to lose you like Ian's are. I love it. Yeah. So I'm glad you shared it.
Yeah.
Tracy, before we begin, I will just say that if it had just been the 30-second clip, I would probably have watched it, enjoyed it, but I wouldn't have shared it to review. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, yeah, because I went through the same thought process as both of you guys, really. I mean, I got a fair bit to say about this as well, naturally. Done a bit of digging and all the rest of it. I probably would have preferred these two things as being separated out, actually. But I agree for the purposes of us reviewing it, it has to be together, doesn't it? But I will come back to that because I think like Phil and like you, Damien, I would not have given this much of a second thought, I don't think. But I'll probably come back to that again later on. I think one of the things I really enjoyed about the film is that it's evident that you're it's a bit more than a Star Wars fan animation that we're looking at. It's most definitely a creator that has, he understands a lot about film criticism and how it's expressed through animation. I think this guy knows a lot about filmmaking, actually. I think the starting point is really fascinating, and I had a look at the whole of the cut film, the Nick Gillard original choreography. I watched the whole thing, and it's a really impressive thing to even think about having a go at trying to animate that. Um, and then rather than recreating the entire deleted sequence, what he's doing clearly is just focusing on a section of it, not the whole thing. Because I can't imagine how difficult that would have been actually.
Mm.
So instead of trying to reproduce it frame by frame, I think what this guy's doing really well is he's recognizing that there are some very fundamental things going on that he needs to address, and the choreography from the live action just simply doesn't work in the Clone Wars visual style, as is the very first point that he makes, which I think is really interesting because it's at that point that he says that I think, oh, okay, now I'm going to have to listen to what he's saying in a lot more detail than perhaps I would have done if he was just saying, right, I did it like this, I did it like that. So what he's saying then is I couldn't simply copy the choreography directly. Instead, I've got to interpret it or reinterpret it.
Yeah, that was a key moment, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Which that's the point, as I said, that's the point I sort of sat up and started to think, okay, we're not looking at just another Star Warsy type thing here then. I mean, most fan films really are concerned with accuracy, and they're basically asking things like, can I recreate Star Wars? Well, this isn't asking that at all. It's more about how do I translate Star Wars into a completely different artistic language whilst preserving what makes it emotionally powerful. Doing it, that's the essence of what he's doing here. Entirely different approach. I think
Preserving, if not enhancing. I'm
exactly.
thinking specifically of the sword cross moment that
Indeed.
he put
Yeah.
in there.
There's
Brilliant.
there's a lot going on that's just not a straight copying and recreating the choreography at all. He's really elevating the work beyond that. And it's super interesting. I think it's kind of funny actually because it's the second film this month that we've looked at that's taken that exact same approach to creating something through the lens of a different medium. And even if we think about what Ricky's first pick was as well, The Fixer was doing something the same as well. So it's really interesting that we've got all this selection of films that are looking at one thing and looking at it through the lens of another thing. This is exactly in that model, I think. So, comparison between Revenge of the Sith and the Clone Wars is one of the kind of the strongest parts of what he's trying to do. Nick Gillard's lightsaber choreography is really fast. It's kind of fluid, and it's almost kind of continuous. The actors are fencing at this just extraordinary speed, and these movements are flowing one into the other. I can't imagine how difficult that was to act it, let alone try and then animate it. I mean, the Clone Wars was deliberately. I mean, the the movements are, what he's trying to do is sort of pull them apart a little. He's trying to sort of, and he's trying to sort of anticipate or present the anticipation of the attacks more strongly. He's trying to sort of create the silhouettes as being more exaggerated and those sort of follow through poses are being held for a little bit longer than they were in the Gillard's version of it, making sort of quite clear that there's a strike and a fight taking place, and I guess from an audience point of view that makes it easier for us to sort of see it and read it because somehow we can inherently read it when it's people, but it's harder when you're looking at it just as animation. And I think that's the clever bit in what he's doing, really. I think animation kind of always relies on principles like anticipation and sort of staging and silhouette. So rather than kind of forcing live action choreography into animation, he's basically creating this kind of hybrid. And he's sort of combining the choreography with the kind of visual grammar of the Clone Wars to produce something that feels kind of authentic to both. I think that's a really clever thing that he's tried to do here, and I think he's done it really well, actually. there's an awful lot of sort of thought that's gone into the storytelling. I mean, that as you said, Palpatine, for example, instead of beginning with a wide establishing shot, he's kind of immediately on a close-up of Palpatine's face, and he's then, the camera sort of slowly moving around him as he's kind of watching the duel. That's an interesting strategy because it immediately tells us that there's something important about what we're looking at. This character is not just watching events unfold, just by the way he's looking or seem to be looking at the two characters fighting, and he's the way that he's being orchestrated into that scene. It's very evident that there is a sense of control being portrayed in that character. And just in that one shot alone, he's captured that sort of essence and that depth. I think that kind of it echoes perfectly what McDermott's performance was trying to portray in Palpatine, where evidently that character very rarely needed to actually fight, as I understand it.
Right.
I think everyone else believes they're making choices while he's quietly directing events from the shadows. But to have caught that in the animation, very interesting. I think towards the end, the creator deliberately mirrors the final kind of lightsaber clash with Skywalker and Vader sort of locking sabers in front of the Emperor. But I think he's tapping directly there into George Lucas's favorite storytelling ideas, which is kind of visual rhyming. I mean, as I understand it, Lucas often describes Star Wars as a saga built around these kind of repeated visual thematic patterns. Anakin's journey echoes Luke's, the throne room in Return of the Jedi echoes the Chancellor's office in in the Invisible Hand in Revenge of the Sith, and these kind of characters.
Vader loses a hand, Luke loses a hand.
Yeah, this kind of
sometimes very deliberate.
Very deliberate sort of, you know, they face similar moral choices in different circumstances, and those patterns are repeated again and again. I think that's a very interesting thing. And here, what you've got is the creator recognizing exactly that, as he kind of points out. In both scenes, Palpatine is watching the same story unfold. You've got a young Jedi gradually giving into aggression while he's quietly manipulating events in the background. And it kind of transforms the recreated composition from simple fan service, I guess, into visual storytelling rooted in the mythology of Star Wars itself. Now, the character animation, I think, is handled just as thoughtfully. Anakin is introduced by sort of leaping into the frame, and his camera movement is energetic and kind of unpredictable. And he's always kind of leaning forward and pressing into the attack. And that's kind of, even that brief smile before the duel accelerates that kind of suggestion that he's going to enjoy the fight. And you can kind of see that in these characters. It's really fascinating to sort of watch how he's done it. And then in contrast, you've got this Dooku character, or Dooku. Dooku? Dooku. Dooku. I mean, his movement is controlled, it's measured, it's elegant, and the inclusion of this kind of signature salute immediately kind of establishes his personality before a single blow is kind of exchanged. And the silhouette, you've got that, it's done so well. It's designed to kind of combine Christopher Lee's live action with the look of, the Tales of the Jedi, and it's done it so stylistically. It's very clever. It's really very clever. I think none of the decisions that you see are kind of accidental. They're all examples of this guy's craft in using movement to communicate character rather than simply animate action. So for me, technically, the project is really impressive. He discusses rebuilding the character sculpts, multiple times, as you said, Phil, refining light to separate the characters from the background, which I think is a very interesting approach. I think there's a lot of craft in that. You also pointed that one out, I think, as well, Phil. I think he's introducing volumetric lighting to kind of increase the depth and even creating this kind of procedural lightsaber arc system in Blender rather than kind of just animating a motion trail by hand. I can't imagine how challenging that would have been to even attempt to do it that way. It's the obvious kind of way to do it, but it's that kind of thing that makes me think this guy's got a lot of skill behind what he's doing. He's got a workflow approach to this that is basically what I would consider to be professional animation rather than just somebody coming at this cold, so to speak. I think it's what makes this especially relevant for machinima and virtual filmmaking. Um, is basically he's demonstrating how accessible these digital tools are now. But I think you have to have the craft in there as well to sort of exploit the tools. And I think, something like this really shows you that having some of the craft makes the decisions that you're making a little bit more, there's more depth to it than just sort of picking something that you're going to copy, for example. I think, compared with many modern Star Wars films, which often just sort of, I guess, focus on the sparkle and the spectacle of what ILM were doing. I think this project feels much more interested in trying to get underneath the skin of the film and try and understand the language through which it's portrayed. That's a depth of stuff that we don't see all that often, actually. I think it's what makes this piece quite compelling. It's an exploration of adaptation and visual storytelling and kind of cinematic language, and it demonstrates that great fan filmmaking isn't about reproducing every frame perfectly. It's about understanding the creative decisions and then trying to find a way to express them. And I think there's a lot of thought that's gone into that. So back to then my first comment on why present this as a how-to and then a film. I guess a final question I had to think about when I was reflecting on it really is why, if they'd have been separated, would I have appreciated all the detail that's gone into the making of it? And I don't think the answer to that is yes, by any means. Because I just don't think I would have taken in the depth of the craft that this guy has shown in making it. I would certainly have appreciated the detail and the editing, but not the decision making as it's been explained. This is not a how-to in the way that you see a lot of these tutorials put on. I didn't see it in the same way as the Ian Hubert example. Even this is a there's more to this than it's not a traditional how-to for me. I think part of that is because I don't really have all the insight into Star Wars and the canon that sort of sits behind it that lots will have, that will sit and watch this. But I think mainly it's because of the animation craft that it's embodying. It's a little bit like when I showed you the Liv Viathen's demo RAM, where she'd adapted the demo man and turned it into the RAM. And I later gave you a link to her creative process, but you only saw the film. Now, that's not actually a criticism here, because in fact, I think it's probably the biggest compliment you can pay the filmmaker, actually. If you just shown me the final animation, I'd have come away thinking, yeah, that's fantastic. It's a great recreation of the choreography of the fight. It feels really polished. The choreography has real weight to it. The lighting is beautiful, and it all feels remarkably authentic. And I'd absolutely recognize the high quality of the work, but I wouldn't have recognized why it was high quality. Because without that explanation, I just wouldn't have known almost, that every movement has been redesigned, for example. I probably would have just assumed he'd have copied and deleted bits of the choreography. Yeah, I just wouldn't have got it. I wouldn't have had any idea that Anakin's face had been rebuilt again and again, or that Dooku's face had been kind of blended in the way that it has. Even a lot of the technical work that I've just sort of commented on, it's just hidden. It's one of those situations really where the better the work, the less you notice. You notice what's been done. I think there are a few things I think experienced animators and filmmakers might have picked up on. You guys have clearly done that. You can feel that the combat has kind of anticipation, and the choreography feels slightly more readable than a live action version. But even then, I don't think most people would identify why it feels so different without that sort of making of, which really highlights the craftsmanship that's gone behind it. But what it reminded me of is actually it's a little bit like practice-based research. If you're familiar with research through practice, the final animation is almost like the creative artifact, while the making of it is the kind of exegesis of it, if you like. The artifact demonstrates the solution, but the exegesis, it kind of explains the question, the methodology, the kind of countless decisions that led to it. And without that context, you'd never fully appreciate the originality of the work. So perhaps the greatest irony here is that the film succeeds almost too well. The adaptation is so seamless that most viewers will simply accept it as kind of natural. They won't notice the hundreds of creative decisions that make the work what it is. I think that sort of final 30 seconds just looks completely effortless, but only because the first 6 minutes reveal just how much thinking and experimentation and craftsmanship has actually gone into it. But fundamentally, they've just disappeared underneath the surface of it. So for me, it's a really great pick. It's a real provocation, I think, for our comments. Yeah, I really enjoyed having a think about what was going on here. And yeah, I would not have watched it as the 30 seconds.
Yeah, the thing is that 30-second clip without context, because it doesn't have any narrative context unless you happen to be in the mindset and know where to place it in the sequence of the film.
Yeah.
And that doesn't come naturally. Like a student of Star Wars might do that, but most people will just be, okay, this is a clip. A 30-second clip like that, that's something that would be in someone's ArtStation profile.
Yeah.
Because then the profile is the context. This is stuff I've made. And so it's little pieces. And sometimes those are just screenshots and they're 30-second clips or whatever. And that's what the finished product is. So rather than, like you said, recreate the whole scene to give it the context of narrative, maybe we're looking at this wrong. Like he refers to the 30 seconds there as the finished product. But I think that the finished product is, I think the whole reason for posting it on YouTube is for that intro part. That
So do
wasn't
I.
there.
So do I.
That wasn't there to justify
Yeah.
the 30-second clip. The 30-second clip is there to justify
The 6 minutes.
what he really wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I agree.
And you're right, too, that it differs substantially from Ian's in a few regards, but the key one is Ian never, ever talks about why.
Yeah.
He doesn't explain his decisions, really. He explains the how-to, and he might explain how in a technical capacity only, but that's not the theme of his videos. But this was less about the tech and more about why I chose to do this, or here's the problem and here's why. Here's why the animation, when brought over from live action, wasn't working. He didn't just notice it. He identified what specifically about it was making it lack energy. Yeah. And then how do I add energy to it? And so he changed the transition curves, which anyone who's worked with animations and iClone know that's a tool that's right there. It's maybe underused, right? But a sword swing that's just a straight linear motion is much different than
Yeah.
that, and
Yeah.
that's all transition curves. That's part of Blender. That's part of any animation platform. So that was the tech, but the most interesting part about that wasn't transition curves. You don't have to understand transition curves to see what he was saying there. So yeah, it's brilliantly presented for an audience that didn't need to really understand Star Wars. Like
Yeah.
you do not need to have a fascination with Star Wars to appreciate this video. And you don't have to have a background in animation to appreciate this either, because he explains enough of it. We understand things like energy of motion. You don't need to know iClone or Blender or anything to get that, So,
Yeah.
and we understand how, light affects. We understand the psychological effect of showing that Dooku's salute. You don't need to know anything about tech or Star Wars to appreciate that. As a Star Wars fan, as someone, if you know Star Wars or you know about George, then you really appreciate it because you know that he based these Jedi. One of the sources of inspiration was knights and samurai, like these. That's why people who criticize the original lightsaber battle between Darth Vader and Kenobi in A New Hope, in the first Star Wars movie, they criticize it compared to today's very acrobatic, Jedi battles, and say that it lacked energy. But that wasn't what that battle was about. This was two old warriors facing off in this ritualistic combat, and it didn't need to have backflips and stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway, I've seen someone actually recreate the Darth Vader and Kenobi thing in CGI and added.
I've seen that too.
Yeah, and it's neat looking and stuff, but I've heard someone make the case. I can't remember who it was that first made the case in the video, but they talked about the, to say that battle is lacking because it doesn't have acrobatics is completely missing the point
Absolutely.
of what
Yeah.
these face-offs are. These
Yeah.
are two characters with history, and there's a ritual and there's a somberness, and
Yeah.
so yeah. And this guy understands all of that, I think, and worked
Yes.
those things in. I
Yes.
think he did a better job of rhyming some of the ideas about this scene than the original movie did.
Yes.
That
Yes.
crossing sabers thing, that's such an iconic scene from Return of the Jedi. And his instinct to put that in there, to me, in the movie, this face-off between these two, I was obsessed with other details and never really made a giant connection between it. I saw, okay, so it's kind of somewhat analogous, but in Return of the Jedi, it's father and son. There's that dynamic, and you never really feel like Luke has been headed to the dark side. He may be teetering a bit, but you don't feel like that he's really going to go there. He just got finished telling his father, "I still believe that you can be saved," when they're in the elevator. So you don't expect Luke to fully go dark. Anakin, by this point, we've seen him do a lot of stuff that makes you think he's not on the right path at all. So I got hung up on that. And then, if I'm not mistaken, Damien, isn't he strapped into that chair still? He's like a cat.
Yeah, there's some kind of binders
Right?
holding his wrists in place.
Right. Now, we all know that he could have just gotten out of that real quick, and he was deliberately staying there. But all of those things kind of distracted me. And so I didn't really get the rhyme like I do now, having seen this little clip. So it's very, very effective.
Mm.
Yeah.
Great
Yeah.
picking.
There's some things in it, like he was talking about how taking the live action footage and just doing it directly wouldn't work. And I was thinking, yeah, I've had some experience with that. If those actors in the clip had motion capture suits on, and they recorded that data when they were filming that scene originally, and then you try to bring it into any kind of animation software, it would look really stupid. Like he's saying that they're doing like that, but much faster than I can. It would look like that, and probably worse. Um,
Mm.
because even though the character models are designed to have a fairly human skeleton and move like humans, they don't. And I can't explain it because I don't necessarily have the right technical knowledge to explain it correctly. But if you ever try doing anything like that, you know what I'm talking about. Like the characters just something about the way the bones work on the digital characters just don't quite mimic human characters. And you'll get things like the lightsaber will go through the heads and they'll do that or something like that. And it's not just because it's wrong, it's just something about the way the data will translate. And so the way he changes this and adapts, uses some of the Clone Wars style animation, he makes you think, so that's why they changed it for the animation when
Yeah.
they're doing the animated series. You get that appreciation of why the animation show isn't quite like the live action stuff in ways you might not necessarily have thought about until
Yep.
someone like this comes along and explains why they didn't do it.
I think some of that is analogous too to the when actors perform on a theatrical stage versus on camera, motion is handled in a different way. You have to do things differently and bigger
Mm.
Hmm.
in theater. It's a similar type of thing that there's something about the animated platform that needs more motion than, and I don't know how to fully explain it either. It is part of it is the limitation of the way that the joints or the ligaments, so to speak, work with these models, but also it just there's something about the animated look that, yeah, those unnatural amplifications to movement really uh, increase the energy. And I don't know how much of that is just because that's the way it's been done for so long in anime and other things like that. Is that just that we're visually primed to expect that? Or you got to figure they must have done it for a reason too, you know? So yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting to think about.
Well, I'm glad you both enjoyed it. And yeah, I think the point of it was not those 30 seconds at the end. It was the whole. There are lots of videos out there. Someone will set out to make something, and the whole point of the video is to show them making it. They don't necessarily go step by step, but they're showing the progress. And they'll talk about whatever they're making, and then they'll show the final result at the end. And the final result is just, well, this is what I ended up with. But it's more about it's the journey is more important than the destination.
And you have to think he must have thought of that before starting out, because
Yeah.
unless
Yes.
he's just someone who films everything he does, you know, just records his screen all the time and after the fact goes, I should tell people how I did this. This was interesting. No, he probably thought about it ahead of time, which is
Yeah.
great.
All right, so that wraps up this week's video. Uh, if you've got any comments on this video, Star Wars or adapting footage for animation or anything of these things that we've been discussing, please send us an email at talk@completemachinery.com. For now, goodbye from me and from Phil and Tracy.
Goodbye.
Bye
We'll
bye.
see you next week.